The price of betrayal is steep, and nobody understands this better than I do now. 3 months ago, I was just another trusting soul, believing in the people closest to me. Today, I am wiser, stronger, and the architect of a revenge so meticulously planned that even I sometimes marvel at what necessity has made of me. It began on an ordinary Tuesday in March. The investment firm where I had dedicated 7 years of my life was buzzing with the usual morning energy. As senior financial analyst, I had built a reputation for turning struggling portfolios into gold mines. My clients trusted me implicitly, and my colleagues, I thought, respected me. My office overlooked the sprawling cityscape, a daily reminder of how far I had come from the small town, where I grew up with dreams bigger than possibilities. That view had witnessed countless late nights, sacrifice weekends, and personal milestones delayed for the sake of my career. The corner office was my trophy, earned through relentless dedication. "Morning, Janet," smiled Elise, my assistant, placing my coffee on the desk exactly as I liked it, strong black, no sugar. "The Henderson portfolio review is prepped for your 10 a.m., and Mr. Davenport called again about his tech investments." I nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Elise. Could you also pull the quarterly projections for Pacific Ridge? I am meeting with the board tomorrow." "Already on it," she replied with that efficiency that made her invaluable. "Oh, and Marcus wanted to see you. He said it could not wait." Marcus Reinhardt, my direct supervisor and mentor since I joined the firm. The man who had championed my promotions, guided my strategies, and seemingly believed in me when others had doubted. We had developed a professional relationship that bordered on friendship, or so I had believed. "I will stop by his office before my first meeting," I promised, settling into my morning routine. The Henderson portfolio review went smoothly, my recommendations earning approving nods from the elderly couple who had entrusted their retirement savings to my expertise. As they left, handshakes warm with gratitude, I felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done. This was why I worked so hard, to provide security and peace of mind to people who deserved it. It was nearly noon when I finally made my way to Marcus's office. His door was closed, unusual for this time of day. I knocked gently, hearing hushed voices inside that fell silent at my interruption. "Come in," called Marcus, his voice carrying that practiced authoritative tone he used during board meetings. I entered to find him seated behind his imposing mahogany desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Beside him stood Clayton Reeves, the firm's somewhat oily HR director, wearing an expression I could not quite decipher. The atmosphere in the room felt charged, like the air before a storm. "Janet, please sit down." Marcus gestured to the chair across from him, not quite meeting my eyes. Something in his demeanor sent warning signals through my body. I remained standing. "Elise mentioned you wanted to see me. What could not wait, Marcus?" Marcus and Clayton exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded me entirely. "Janet," Marcus began, his voice carefully modulated to convey regret that did not reach his eyes. "There's no easy way to say this. The firm is undergoing restructuring, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated." The words hung in the air between us, surreal and disconnected from reality. My position eliminated? I had just closed our largest account last month. My client retention rate was the highest in the firm. "Restructuring." I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "I see. And when was this decision made?" "The board finalized it yesterday," Clayton interjected, sliding a folder across the desk. "We've prepared a severance package that we believe is quite generous. 2 months' salary, benefits through the end of the quarter, and of course, we would be happy to provide references." "I am not concerned about references." I cut him off, my mind racing ahead. "What happens to my clients? My ongoing projects?" Marcus cleared his throat. "They'll be distributed among the team, primarily to Alex, as he'll be taking over most of your responsibilities." Alex, the new hire with barely 3 years' experience. Marcus's nephew, who had joined the firm straight out of business school, coasting on his family connection and charm, rather than any demonstrable talent. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "This is not restructuring," I stated flatly. "This is nepotism." Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. But his resolve did not waver. "The decision has been made, Janet. We'd appreciate it if you could clear out your office by the end of the day. Security will assist you." Security? As if I were a threat rather than the woman who had helped build this firm's reputation from the ground up. "I would like to speak with Richard," I demanded, referring to the firm's founder and CEO. "Richard is aware of the situation and supports the board's decision," Marcus replied smoothly. "He's in meetings offsite today." Of course he was. How convenient. What followed was a blur of humiliation. Security watching as I packed 7 years of my professional life into cardboard boxes. Colleagues averting their eyes as word spread through the office. Elise tearfully helping me gather personal items, while whispering that she had known nothing about this. I believed her. Elise had always been loyal, perhaps the only genuine relationship I had in that snake pit of an office. As I was escorted from the building, my access card deactivated before I even reached the elevator. One thought crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. This was not over. Not by a long shot. The next few days passed in a haze of shock and gathering rage. I learned that my termination had been in the works for weeks. Marcus had been systematically transitioning my top clients to Alex behind my back, holding private meetings, undermining my recommendations, preparing them for the change, before I even knew my career was on the chopping block. But the most damning discovery came from an unexpected source. Elise called me 3 days after my dismissal, her voice hushed and nervous. "Janet, I should not be telling you this, but I could not live with myself otherwise," she whispered. "The Alpine strategy, your investment algorithm for the Asian markets. Marcus presented it to the board last week as Alex's work. They're implementing it next quarter with Alex as lead. The Alpine strategy, my magnum opus, the investment approach I had developed over 2 years of research and testing, the proprietary algorithm that could have made me a partner at the firm, the work I had trusted Marcus to protect when I had brought it to him, seeking his guidance before the final presentation. He had stolen it, and he had given it to his nephew. That night, alone in my apartment with a glass of whiskey I had been saving for a special occasion, I made a decision. Marcus Reinhardt, Alex, and everyone else involved in this betrayal would learn what happened when they crossed the wrong woman. I would take back what was mine, and more. But revenge would require patience. Precision. I needed to be smarter than simple retaliation. What I needed was justice, so perfect it would leave no fingerprints. My first step was to secure my financial position. The severance package was insulting, but I signed it. I needed that money while I plotted my next moves. I also began reaching out to my professional network, not for job opportunities as everyone assumed, but for information. The financial world was smaller than people realized, and rumors traveled fast. I wanted to know everything about Horizon's plans, their vulnerabilities, and most importantly, Marcus's ambitions. Within 2 weeks, I had a clearer picture. Marcus was positioning himself to take over when Richard retired next year, using my Alpine strategy as his ticket to the top. Meanwhile, Alex was floundering with my former clients despite the advantages he had been given. I also discovered something Marcus did not know I knew. Before my termination, I had been approached by Horizon's largest competitor, Meridian Capital, with a job offer. I had declined out of loyalty to Horizon. That loyalty now struck me as laughably misplaced. I called my contact at Meridian. "Cassandra? It's Janet. I have been reconsidering your offer, if it is still open." The interview process was a formality. Meridian had been trying to poach me for years, and they knew my reputation. What they did not know was my true motivation for joining them. At least, not yet. "We're thrilled to have you on board, Janet," smiled Victor Harmon, Meridian's CEO, as we signed the employment contract. "Your expertise in Asian markets is exactly what we need right now." I smiled back, the perfect picture of gratitude and enthusiasm. "I am excited to bring my experience to Meridian. I have some innovative approaches I cannot wait to implement here." What I did not mention was that those innovative approaches were significantly different from the Alpine strategy Marcus had stolen. In the weeks following my termination, I had identified the critical flaws in my original algorithm. Flaws I had intentionally never documented or mentioned to Marcus. flaws that would become apparent only when the strategy was implemented on a large scale. My position at Meridian gave me access to market data that ordinary analysts could only dream of. I monitored Horizon's movements closely, watching as they began rolling out Alex's groundbreaking approach to their biggest clients. I could practically hear the ticking of the time bomb I had left behind. Meanwhile, I was building my reputation at Meridian with legitimate, brilliant work. My new clients were thrilled with the results I delivered. Victor began mentioning partnership tracks. I was invited to speak at industry conferences. My name was appearing in financial publications. And I made sure Marcus knew it all. I never contacted him directly. That would have been too obvious. But I cultivated relationships with financial journalists who were all too happy to cover the rising star at Meridian. I accepted awards where I knew Horizon executives would be present. I became unavoidable in Marcus's professional circles. 6 months after my termination, I received a text from Elise, who had since left Horizon for a better position elsewhere. They're panicking. Alpine strategy failing catastrophically. Japanese markets tanked overnight. Alex blaming data models. I allowed myself one small smile before composing my face back to professional neutrality for my next client meeting. The first domino had fallen. What Marcus and Alex could not know, what no one at Horizon could know, was that the Alpine strategy required constant recalibration based on subtle market indicators. Indicators I had never documented. Without those adjustments, the algorithm would slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin making flawed predictions. Small errors at first, easily attributed to normal market volatility. But over time, those errors would compound, leading to increasingly disastrous investment decisions. By month 7, Horizon was in damage control mode. They had lost 3 major clients to competitors, 2 of them to me at Meridian. The financial press was beginning to ask questions about the firm's sudden downturn. Richard, who had planned to retire, was now back in the office full-time, trying to salvage the situation. It was time for phase 2. I had not been idle during these months of watching Horizon's slow decline. I had been gathering evidence, emails Elise had forwarded before leaving, documentation of how my intellectual property had been stolen, testimony from clients who had been misled about who had developed their investment strategies. I had built a case so airtight it could have withstood a Category 5 hurricane. Then I reached out to Richard directly, not as a former employee seeking reinstatement, but as a concerned financial professional warning him about potential legal exposure. Richard, this is Janet. I believe we need to talk about what has been happening at Horizon. The meeting was set for the following day at a neutral location, an upscale restaurant where financial deals were often discreetly discussed. Richard looked older than I remembered, the stress of recent months etched into the lines around his eyes. Janet, he acknowledged, shaking my hand firmly. I appreciate you reaching out. I wish it were under better circumstances, I replied, taking my seat across from him. But I believe you should know the full story before things get worse for Horizon. Over the next hour, I methodically laid out what had happened, how Marcus had orchestrated my removal to position his nephew for advancement, how my proprietary investment strategy had been stolen and presented as Alex's work, and how that strategy was now failing, because they lacked critical information that only I possessed. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grim. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. These are serious allegations, he finally said. Do you have proof? In response, I slid a USB drive across the table. Everything is there. Emails, documentation, client testimonials. Enough to support not only a wrongful termination suit, but also intellectual property theft claims that could cost Horizon millions. Richard picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers thoughtfully. What do you want, Janet? This was the question I had been waiting for. The culmination of months of careful planning. Justice, I answered simply. I want Marcus and Alex removed from the firm. I want a public acknowledgement that the Alpine strategy was my work. I want compensation for the theft of my intellectual property. Richard's eyes narrowed. That's a tall order. The alternative is litigation that will drag Horizon's reputation through the mud for years, I countered calmly. The publicity alone would destroy client confidence. The firm might not survive it. And if we meet these demands, he asked, what guarantee do I have that this ends here? My word, I said, which, unlike some at your firm, still means something. I have no interest in destroying Horizon. I helped build it, after all. My quarrel is with those who betrayed me, not with the institution itself. Richard studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. I need to review this evidence and consult with our legal team. Of course, I agreed. You have my number. 3 days later, Richard called. Marcus and Alex had been terminated effective immediately. A press release was being drafted acknowledging my contribution to the Alpine strategy and expressing regret for the misattribution. A settlement offer would be forthcoming for the intellectual property claim. There's one more thing, Richard added. The board has authorized me to offer you your position back. With a substantial raise and the partnership track, we should have offered you a year ago. I had anticipated this offer. In many ways, it would have been the perfect closing of the circle, returning triumphant to the firm that had discarded me. But I had outgrown Horizon in my time away. I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I must decline. I am very happy at Meridian. However, I would be willing to consult on correcting the issues with the Alpine strategy. For an appropriate fee, of course. Richard chuckled dryly. Of course. I expected as much. The fee is not an issue. The press release went out the following week. The financial world buzzed with speculation about the sudden departure of Marcus and his nephew, and the unusual public acknowledgement of an intellectual property dispute. My name was mentioned prominently. My current success at Meridian noted. My phone rang constantly with calls from journalists seeking comments. To all of them, I gave the same measured response. I am pleased that Horizon has taken steps to address this unfortunate situation. I wish them well going forward. Privately, I allowed myself to savor the reports from former colleagues about Marcus's humiliating exit. Security escorting him from the building, personal items in a cardboard box, access card deactivated before he reached the elevator. Poetic justice at its finest. The settlement check arrived a month later, large enough to secure my financial independence regardless of my career path. I used part of it to buy a beachfront property I had always dreamed of owning. The rest went into investments that would grow steadily over time. My consulting arrangement with Horizon was brief but lucrative. I provided just enough information to stabilize the Alpine strategy, without revealing all its secrets. Richard understood the game, and did not push for more than I was willing to give. As for Marcus, I heard through industry channels that he was struggling to find a new position. Firms were reluctant to hire an executive with his recent history, particularly given the public nature of his departure from Horizon. Alex had fared somewhat better, landing a junior position at a smaller firm, where his family connections could not help him advance. 1 year to the day after my termination, I received an unexpected email from Marcus. It was brief and clearly difficult for him to write. Janet, I owe you an apology. What I did was unforgivable. I let ambition and family loyalty cloud my judgment, and betrayed someone who deserved better. I am not asking for forgiveness, merely acknowledging my wrongdoing. Marcus. I read it 3 times before composing my reply. Marcus, apology received. Actions have consequences. I hope you have learned from yours. Janet. Simple. Dignified. Final. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The sound of waves breaking against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. I had accomplished what I set out to do. Justice had been served. The people who betrayed me had faced consequences proportionate to their actions. My professional reputation was not just restored but enhanced. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than before. Yet as I sipped my champagne, the expensive kind I now could afford without hesitation, I realized that the most satisfying aspect of my revenge was not the downfall of Marcus, or the humiliation of Alex, or even the substantial settlement check. It was the knowledge that I had beaten them at their own game, using intelligence rather than malice, strategy rather than rage. I had been underestimated, and that had been their fatal error. The greatest revenge, I discovered, was not just succeeding despite those who tried to destroy you. It was succeeding because of them. Every obstacle they placed in my path had forced me to find new routes forward. Every betrayal had taught me valuable lessons about human nature and business realities. Every setback had fueled my determination to rise higher than before. In attempting to eliminate me as a competitor, Marcus had unknowingly created his most formidable adversary. In stealing my work, he had compelled me to create something even better. In trying to erase me, he had only ensured that I would become unforgettable. As darkness fell over the ocean, I raised my glass in a solitary toast, not to the downfall of my enemies, but to the strength I had found in myself. The price of betrayal had indeed been steep, but ironically, I was not the one who had paid it. The next morning, I awoke to news that Meridian was acquiring a controlling interest in Horizon Investments. Victor had kept his plans quiet, even from me, though he hinted I had been instrumental in identifying Horizon as a viable acquisition target. "We would like you to oversee the transition team," he told me over breakfast. "Given your history with both firms, you bring a unique perspective." I smiled, accepting the assignment with appropriate professional enthusiasm. Life, it seemed, had a sense of irony that exceeded even my capacity for poetic justice. The offices where I had once been escorted out in humiliation would soon be under my authority. The firm that had discarded me would now answer to me. It was not an outcome I had specifically engineered. I could not take credit for Meridian's business strategy. But it was a satisfying epilogue to my story nonetheless. Sometimes, justice arrives through channels we could not have anticipated. Sometimes, the universe conspires to right wrongs in ways more perfect than even the most carefully planned revenge. As I prepared to enter Horizon's offices for the first time since my termination, this time with the full authority of Meridian behind me, I felt no need to gloat or prove a point. My success spoke for itself. My presence was statement enough. The lesson was clear for anyone paying attention. Underestimate a capable woman at your peril. What they took from me, I had reclaimed tenfold. What they tried to destroy, I had rebuilt stronger. Their betrayal had been the catalyst for my greatest professional triumph. And that perhaps was the most satisfying revenge of all.